Chapter 25. When I wake, I have a brief, delicious feeling of happiness that is somehow connected with PETA. Happiness, of course, is a complete absurdity at this point, since at the rate things are going, I'll be dead in a day. And that's the best case scenario. If I'm able to eliminate the rest of the field, including myself, and get PETA crowned as the winner of the quarter quell. Still, the sensation's so unexpected and sweet that I cling to it, if only for a few moments, before the gritty sand, the hot sun, and my itching skin demand a return to reality. Everyone's already up and watching the descent of a parachute to the beach. I join them for another delivery of bread. It's identical to the one we received the night before. 24 rolls from District 3. That gives us 33 in all. We each take 5, leaving 8 in reserve. No one says it, but 8 will divide up perfectly after the next death. Somehow in the light of day, joking about who will be around to eat the rolls has lost its humor. How can we keep this alliance? I don't think anyone expected the number of tributes to drop so quickly. What if I'm wrong about the others protecting PETA? If things were simply coincidental, or it's all been a strategy to win our trust to make us easy prey, or I don't understand what's actually going on. Wait, there's no ifs about that. I don't understand what's actually going on. If I don't, it's time for PETA and me to clear out of here. I sit next to PETA on the sand to eat my rolls. For some reason, it's difficult to look at him. Maybe it was all that kissing last night, although the two of us kissing isn't anything new. It might not have even felt any different for him. Maybe it's knowing the brief amount of time we have left and how we're working at such cross purposes when it comes to who should survive these games. After we eat, I take his hand and tug him toward the water. Come on, I'll teach you how to swim. I need to get him away from the others where we can discuss breaking away. It'll be tricky because once they realize we're severing the alliance, we'll be instant targets. If I was really teaching him to swim, I'd make him take off the belt, since it keeps him afloat. But what does it matter now? So I just show him the basic stroke and let him practice going back and forth in waist-high water. At first, I noticed Joanna keeping a careful eye on us. But eventually she loses interest and goes to take a nap. Phoenix weaving a new net out of vines, and Beatty plays with his wire. I know the time has come. When PETA has been swimming, I've discovered something. My remaining scabs are starting to peel off. By gently rubbing a handful of sand up and down my arm, I clean off the rest of the scales, revealing fresh new skin underneath. I stop PETA's practice on the pretext of showing him how to rid myself of the itchy scabs. And as we scrub ourselves, I bring up our escape. Look, the pool is down to 8. I think it's time we took off, I say under my breath, although I doubt any of the tributes can hear me. PETA nods, and I can see him considering my proposition, weighing if the odds will be in our favor. Tell you what, he says, let's stick around until Brutus and Anabaria are dead. I think Beatty's trying to put together some kind of trap for them now. Then I promise we'll go. I'm not entirely convinced, but if we leave now, we'll have 2 sets of adversaries after us. Maybe 3, because who knows what Chaff's up to. Plus the clock to contend with. And then there's Beatty to think of. Joanna only brought him for me, and if we leave, she'll surely kill him. And then I remember I can't protect Beatty, too. There can only be one victor, and it has to be PETA. I must accept this. I must make decisions based on his survival only. All right, I say, we'll stay until the careers are dead, but that's the end of it. I turn and wave to Finnick. Hey, Finnick, come on in. We figured out how to make you pretty again. The 3 of us scour all the scabs from our bodies, helping with the others' backs, and come out the same pink as the sky. We apply another round of medicine because the skin seems too delicate for the sunlight, but it doesn't look half as bad on smooth skin, and it will be good camouflage in the jungle. Beatty calls us over, and it turns out that during all those hours of fiddling with wire, he has indeed come up with a plan. I think we'll agree our next job is to kill Brutus and Anabaria, he says mildly. I doubt they'll attack us openly again, now that they're so outnumbered. We could track them down, I suppose, but it's dangerous, exhausting work. Do you think they've figured out about the clock? I ask. If they haven't, they'll figure it out soon enough. Perhaps not as specifically as we have, but they must know that at least some of the zones are wired for attacks, and that they're reoccurring in a circular fashion. Also, the fact that our last fight was cut off by game maker intervention will not have gone unnoticed by them. We know it was an attempt to disorient us, but they must be asking themselves why it was done, and this too may lead them to the realization that the arena is a clock, says Beatty. So, I think our best bet will be setting our own trap. Wait, let me get Joanna up, says Finnick. She'll be rabid if she thinks we missed something this important. Or not, I mutter, since she's always pretty much rabid, but I don't stop him, because I'd be angry myself if I was excluded from a plan at this point. When she's joined us, Beatty shoos us all back a bit so he can have room to work in the sand. He swiftly draws a circle and divides it into 12 wedges. It's the arena, not rendered in Peta's precise strokes, but in the rough lines of a man whose mind is occupied by other far more complex things. If you were Brutus and Inabaria, knowing what you do now about the jungle, where would you feel safest? Beatty asks. There's nothing patronizing in his voice. And yet I can't help thinking he reminds me of a school teacher about to ease children into a lesson. Perhaps it's the age difference, or simply that Beatty is probably about 1,000,000 times smarter than the rest of us. Where we are now, on the beach, it's the safest place. So why aren't they on the beach, says Beatty. Because we're here, Joanna says impatiently. Exactly. We're here, claiming the beach. Now, where would you go, says Beatty. I think about the deadly jungle, the occupied beach. I'd hide just at the edge of the jungle so I could escape if an attack came, and so I could spy on us. Also to eat, Finnick says. The jungle's full of strange creatures and plants, but by watching us, I'd know the seafood's safe. Beatty smiles at us as if we've exceeded his expectations. Yes, good, you do see. Now, here's what I propose. A 12 o'clock strike. What happens exactly at noon and midnight? The lightning bolt hits the tree, I say. Yes. So, what I'm suggesting is that after a bolt hits at noon, but before it hits at midnight, we run my wire from the tree all the way down to the salt water, which is, of course, highly conductive. When the bolt strikes, the electricity will travel down the wire, and not only the water, but also the surrounding beach, which will still be damp from the 10 o'clock wave. Anyone in contact with those surfaces at that moment will be electrocuted, says Beatty. There's a long pause while we all digest Beatty's plan. It seems a bit fantastical to me, impossible even. But why? I've set thousands of snares. Isn't this just a larger snare with a more scientific component? Could it work? How can we even question it? We train to gather fish and lumber and coal? What do we know about harnessing power from the sky? Peta takes a stab at it. Will that wire really be able to conduct that much power, Beatty? It looks so fragile, like it would just burn up. Oh, it will, but not until the current has passed through it. It will act something like a fuse, in fact, except the electricity will travel along it, says Beatty. How do you know? Asks Joanna, clearly not convinced. Because I invented it, says Beatty, as if slightly surprised. It's not actually wire in the usual sense, nor is lightning natural lightning, nor the tree a real tree. You know trees better than any of us, Joanna. It would be destroyed by now, wouldn't it? Yes, she says glumly. Don't worry about the wire. It will do just what I say, Beatty assures us. And where will we be when this happens? Asks Finnick. Up in the jungle to be safe, Beatty replies. The careers will be safe too, then, unless they're in the vicinity of the water, I point out. That's right, says Beatty. But all the seafood will be cooked, says Peta. Probably more than cooked, says Beatty. We will most likely be eliminating that as a food source for good. But you found other edible things in the jungle, right, Katniss? Yes, nuts and rats, I say, and we have sponsors. Well, then, I don't see that as a problem, says Beatty, but as we are all allies and this will require all of our efforts, the decision of whether or not to attempt it is up to you four. We're all like school children, completely unable to dispute his theory with anything but the most elementary concerns, most of which don't even have anything to do with his actual plan. I look at the others' disconcerted faces. Why not? I say. If it fails, there's no harm done. If it works, there's a decent chance we'll kill them. And if we don't and just kill the seafood, Brutus and Anabaria lose it as a food source too. I say we try it, says Peeta. Katniss is right. Finnick looks at Joanna and raises his eyebrows. He will not go forward without her. All right, she says finally. It's better than hunting them down in the jungle anyway, and I doubt they'll figure out our plan since we can barely understand it ourselves. Beetee wants to inspect the lightning tree before he has to rig it. Judging by the sun, it's about 9 in the morning. We have to leave our beach soon anyway, so we break camp, walk over to the beach that borders the lightning section, and head into the jungle. Beetee's still too weak to hike up the slope on his own, so Finnick and Peeta take turns carrying him. I let Joanna lead because it's a pretty straight shot up to the tree, and I figure she can't get us too lost. Besides, I can do a lot more damage with a sheath of arrows than she can with 2 axes, so I'm the best one to bring up the rear. The dense, muggy air weighs on me. There's been no break from it since the games began. I wish Haymitch would stop sending us this District 3 bread and get us some more of that District 4 stuff, because I've sweated out buckets in the last 2 days. And even though I've had the fish, I'm craving salt. A piece of ice would be another good idea, or a cold drink of water. I'm grateful for the fluid from the trees, but it's the same temperature as the seawater, and the air, and the other tributes, and me. We're all just one big warm stew. As we near the tree, Finnick suggests that I take the lead. Katniss can hear the force field, he explains to Beetee and Joanna. Hear it? Asks Beetee. Only with the ear the capital reconstructed, I say. Guess who I'm not fooling with that story? Beetee, because surely he remembers that he showed me how to spot a force field. And probably it's impossible to hear force fields anyway. But for whatever reason, he doesn't question my claim. Then, by all means, let Katniss go first, he says, pausing a moment to wipe the steam off his glasses. Force fields are nothing to play around with. The lightning tree's unmistakable as it towers so high above the others. I find a bunch of nuts and make everyone wait while I move slowly up the slope, tossing the nuts ahead of me. But I see the force field almost immediately, even before a nut hits it, because it's only about 15 yards away. My eyes, which are sweeping to the greenery before me, catch sight of the rippled square high up and to my right. I throw a nut directly in front of me, and I hear it sizzle in confirmation. Just stay below the lightning tree, I tell the others. We divide up duties. Finnick guards Beetee while he examines the tree. Joanna taps for water. Peeta gathers nuts and I hunt nearby. The tree rats don't seem to have any fear of humans, so I take down 3 easily. The sound of the 10 o'clock wave reminds me that I should get back, and I return to the others and clean my kill. Then I draw a line in the dirt a few feet from the force field as a reminder to keep back. And Peeta and I settle down to roast nuts and sear cubes of rat. Beetee is still messing around the tree, doing I don't know what, taking measurements and such. At one point he snaps off a sliver of bark, joins us, and throws against the force field. It bounces back and lands on the ground glowing. In a few minutes it returns to its original color. Well, that explains a lot, says Beetee. I look at Peeta, and I can't help biting my lip to keep from laughing since it explains absolutely nothing to anyone but Beetee. About this time, we hear the sound of clicks rising from the sector adjacent to us. That means it's 11 o'clock. It's far louder in the jungle than it was on the beach last night. We all listen intently. It's not mechanical, Beetee says decidedly. I'd guess insects, I say. Maybe beetles. Something with pinchers, adds Finnick. The sound swells, as if alerted by our quiet words to the proximity of live flesh. Whatever is making that clicking, I bet it could strip us to the bone in seconds. We should get out of here anyway, says Joanna. There's less than an hour before the lightning starts. We don't go that far, though. Only to the identical tree in the blood rain section. We have a picnic of sorts, squatting on the ground, eating our jungle food, waiting for the bolt that signals noon. At Beetee's request, I climb up into the canopy as the clicking begins to fade out. When the lightning strikes, it's dazzling, even from here, even in this bright sunlight. It completely encompasses the distant tree, making it glow like a hot blue white and causing the surrounding air to crackle with electricity. I swing down and report my findings to Beatty, who seems satisfied, even if I'm not terribly scientific. We take a circuitous route back to the 10 o'clock beach. The sand is smooth and damp, swept clean by a recent wave. Beatty essentially gives us the afternoon off while he works with the wire. Since it's his weapon and the rest of us have to defer to his knowledge so entirely, there's the odd feeling of being let out of school early. At first, we take turns having naps in the shadowy edge of the jungle, but by late afternoon, everyone is awake and restless. We decide, since this might be our last chance for seafood, to make sort of a feast of it. Under Finnick's guidance, we spear fish and gather shellfish, even dive for oysters. I like this last part best, not because I have any great appetite for oysters. I only ever tasted them once, in the capital, and I couldn't get around the sliminess. But it's lovely deep down under the water, like being in a different world. The water is very clear, and schools of bright-hued fish and strange sea flowers decorate the sand floor. Joanna keeps watch, while Finnick, Peeta, and I clean and lay out seafood. Peeta's just pried an oyster when I hear him give a laugh. Hey, look at this! He holds up a glistening, perfect pearl about the size of a pea. You know, if you put enough pressure on coal, it turns to pearls, he says earnestly to Finnick. No, it doesn't, says Finnick dismissively, but I crack up, remembering that's how a clueless Effie trinket presented us to the people of the capital last year, before anyone knew us, as coal pressured into pearls by our weighty existence. Beauty arose out of pain. Peeta rinses the pearl off in the water and hands it to me. For you. I hold it out of my palm and examine its iridescent surface in the sunlight. Yes, I will keep it. For the few remaining hours of my life, I will keep it close. This last gift from Peeta, the only one I really can accept. Perhaps it will give me strength in the final moments. Thanks, I say, closing my fist around it. I look coolly into the blue eyes of the person who is now my greatest opponent, the person who will keep me alive at his own expense, and I promise myself I will defeat his plan. The laughter drains from those eyes, and they are staring so intensely into mine, it's like they can read my thoughts. The locket didn't work, did it? Peeta says, even though Finnick is right there, even though everyone can hear him. Cadmus? It worked, I say. But not the way I wanted it to, he says, averting his gaze. After that, he will look at nothing but oysters. Just as we're about to eat, a parachute appears, bearing 2 supplements to our meal. A small pot of spicy red sauce, and yet another round of rolls from District 3. Finnick, of course, immediately counts them. 24 again, he says. 32 rolls, then. So we each take 5, leaving 7, which will never divide equally. It's bread for only 1. The salty fish flesh, the succulent shellfish, even the oysters seem tasty, vastly improved by the sauce. We gorge ourselves until no one can hold another bite, and even then there are leftovers. They won't keep those, so we toss them all, the remaining food, back into the water so the careers won't get it when we leave. No one bothers about the shells. The waves should clear those away. There's nothing to do but wait. Peeta and I sit at the edge of the water, hand in hand, wordless. He gave his speech last night, but it didn't change my mind, and nothing I can say will change his. The time for persuasive gifts is over. I have the pearl, though, secured in a parachute with the spile and the medicine at my waist. I hope it makes it back to District 12. Surely my mother and Prim will know to return it to Peeta before they bury my body.